Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
It's David Grice and Troy Simcock. It's pretty inspiring stuff on The In Show. Startups, entrepreneurs, people up to incredible things, looking to make our lives that little bit easier. But what this guy has encountered is truly phenomenal.
How he's able to turn his life from one moment of 5 seconds into something that's completely different to where he was, while he's still maintaining his connections and links to what he had before, which is just astounding story.
Derrick McManus was a sniper, a special ops diver and counter-terrorist operative with the elite Star Force group of the South Australian Police. But then in 1994, something happened that changed his life forever. Fast forward some 20 years, and Derrick is interested in the durability of human performance, presenting workshops and delivering keynote speeches across the country. His work around durability has valuable impact for startups and entrepreneurs taking on that long journey from the idea to then getting their product out to the global marketplace. So what happened in 1994, Derrick?
1994, I was a member of STAR Group, the Special Task and Rescue Group in the South Australia Police. We were asked to go and arrest a guy who had a warrant for his arrest. The warrant was for 197 counts of fraud. Not something you would normally associate with violence, but we knew this guy's history. We'd been involved in a couple of jobs with this guy before where he'd actually threatened to shoot police in the past. So we knew there was a potential for something to go wrong. However, he had never done anything of violence. He'd made the threats, he'd intimidated people, and this is not just police, this is people in the public as well. So we knew there was a potential, but he never actually did anything. But we were asked to go and arrest him. We went to his house, which is a farm in the Barossa Valley out in Nuriupta. We went to the front door. We were wearing full police uniform and police flak vests because there was always that danger he may start shooting, so we went well prepared. We knocked on the front door, called out that we're the police, we wanted to speak to him, but he wasn't answering the door. However, we had positioned a sniper in the bush about 20 minutes before we arrived, just so that sniper could watch the house, watch the offender. We knew where he was. We knew the right time to approach so that we didn't miss him, we didn't spook him or anything else like that. So we knew he was inside. We knew he should be answering the door. We knocked again, we called again. Again, there was no answer. And at this stage, I've moved down the side of the house to look at a glass sliding door at the side of the house to see whether we could make an entry to arrest this man without causing any damage. As I got to within about 2 feet of that sliding door, he started to shoot. I was the target. He was using a 7.62 or 308 caliber SKK Chinese military assault rifle. The weapons that the Chinese use when they go to war, the bullets fired are the same the Chinese use when they go to war. He fired 18 times in less than 5 seconds and hit me 14 times in less than 5 seconds.
Wow. I mean, it just sort of stops life in its tracks at that point. So what was that experience like and what happened next?
Surprisingly, the experience certainly shocked me at the time, bang, immediate shock. I actually didn't feel the impact of the bullets. I didn't feel the pain of being shot. And initially, I didn't even hear the sound of gunfire. All I knew was I was falling to the ground all of a sudden for what I thought was absolutely no reason. And I felt ridiculous. I felt like an idiot because I was doing something which was completely inexplainable. And as I was falling to the ground, I looked at that glass sliding door again, and there were small round holes that hadn't been there just a moment before. Then I heard the sound of gunfire. Still hadn't felt the pain, still hadn't felt the impact, but as I was falling, I've looked at these holes, heard the sound of gunfire, and I've actually had a conversation with myself around, Derrick, don't be too upset with yourself, because if you're getting shot, it's quite acceptable to fall over. And I don't make that up and I don't extrapolate that in any way, shape or form, or embellish it. That's exactly what I was thinking. I've fallen to the ground, rolled onto my back, and as I'm falling and as I'm lying on my back, he's still shooting within this 5 second period. And 2 bullets hit my left thigh as I'm lying on the ground. And these 2 bullets seemed to take about 30 seconds to hit me. 18 bullets are fired in less than 5. These 2 seem to take 30. The mind has the ability to just analyse every little detail and slow the process down. Lots of people talk about that same experience when they're rolling their car and they can just see things moving around in the car in slow motion. Well, that's exactly what it was for me. Mm-hmm. These 2 bullets just seemed to take 30 seconds. The first one hit me in the left thigh, and there was a shock wave that went up through my body, all the way through to the top of my head. And you know how when you step into a bathtub, a ripple goes from one end of the bath to the other and then it comes back down? The shockwave then passed back slowly down through my body. And then the second bullet hit. And again, it's that bullet in the thigh and a sledgehammer feel. Shockwave up, shockwave back down, and a seemingly 30 seconds to be abusing myself again. I knew I needed to fire back, but before I fired back, I realised I'm shooting along the length of my body and my feet are at the other end of my body. I knew that I needed to get up just a little bit to shoot over the top of my feet. But as I've lifted my upper body up, because I've got a flak vest, weaponry, equipment on my upper body is very heavy, so as I've lifted my upper body up, my feet have come up to counterbalance. And the thought that ran through my head as I was pulling the trigger on that first bullet was, I better not shoot myself in the foot, because if I do, the guys at work would never stop stirring me up for the rest of my life. The words I thought were not quite stirring me up, but slightly more descriptive than that. But for the podcast, I'll use those words. but that's what I thought. The guys will never let me live it down for the rest of my life. And I think I was able to have those thoughts because of what we're going to be talking about tonight. The way that I have looked at, anticipated problems, had a plan in place. If this does happen, this is how I'm going to handle it. And I analogize it to the same experiences when we drive a car. When we first start driving a car, you're a brand new learner, step into the car, mum and dad say, right, drive out the driveway, your hands are on that steering wheel, white-knuckled, you do not want to take it off, you don't want to let that steering wheel slip out of your hands. And then they say, okay, turn right. And you go, okay, I'm going to turn right. No, use your indicator. You mean take my hand off the steering wheel? And it is all that overwhelm because there's so much to do. But because we've done it so well now, so much, we're so used to it, it's just second nature. We don't even think about it. And that's how I prepared myself for the shooting. Certainly Star Group gave us a lot of training, but for this scenario particularly, I'd actually done a lot of visualisation as to how might it feel, how might my body respond, how might I respond emotionally, and if it does happen that way, how will I manage it?
So tell us about that. Obviously, family and all of those loved ones around you as well. I mean, how did you go through that process and include them in that? I mean, obviously you can prepare yourself through all your training, but what about those that are around you? How did you go with that?
It's part of the model for durability that I have. The underpinning philosophy, or as the model is, the golden circle around the outside that holds it all together, is open, honest, confronting conversations. And we've got to have those confronting conversations with ourselves, but with those family around us. And this extends to teams and subordinates. But we've got to have those confronting conversations with those as well. I actually sat down with my wife and had that confronting conversation of, I'm a cop, I'm in Star Group, I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. Now, that was confronting for me to actually have that conversation. To a large degree, it was quite comfortable because I'd already gone through that process mentally already. But for my wife, it was massively confronting. Okay, well, I always knew there was this reality out there, but you mean we're actually going to talk about it now? And I think I'm one of the 1% of police in Australia that have actually had this conversation.
How did it go?
It actually went reasonably well. I don't think she took it with as much reality as I did. And I can't remember the exact conversation, but I remember having that conversation. But I don't think she took it with the same reality. It was certainly confronting, and we had a conversation around, if I die, what would you like to do for the rest of your life? You're going to stay a widow, you're going to get remarried, I give you permission to do whatever you want, live it any way you want. But there was a good conversation around what I wanted her to tell my children about who I was. And that... that brought the tears, and that brought a little bit more reality, but I think it was still one of those things, oh my gosh, this is so big, I really don't want to think about it too much. But for me, it was just an acceptance. I've made a choice. I'm going to put myself in circumstances where these things could possibly happen. I've got to prepare myself for the best chance of outcome by design, rather than just waiting to see what happens and hopefully I'll be able to manage it at that stage, which is what a lot of people do in general life, but certainly as we're going to be talking about tonight with startups, people have great ideas. They know there are some dangers, some things go wrong for other people, but no, we'll be right. We'll get into it and hopefully it'll be okay. Rather than saying it's possible, do we have the resources to manage it if it does happen?
How close was it that your wife had to have that conversation with your kids when you were lying there on your back? How close were you to not being able to have this conversation with us?
I was lying on the ground for 3 hours, and for that 3 hours I was constantly monitoring my body, losing blood, closing down, felt my legs going cold, my arms going cold. I was holding onto a pistol for about 2.5 hours so that if the shooter came back out, I was able to protect myself. After 2.5 hours, that fell out of my hand because I didn't have the strength left in my hand to hold it. And at the 1 hour mark, of me lying on the ground. The police have got to my wife and said, Derrick's been shot. He's been on the ground for a long time now. Nobody's heard from him. It doesn't look good. So that became a massive overwhelm for her. I was on the ground for another 2 hours, 3 hours all up. And at the 2 hours and 45 minutes mark, my blood supply got so low that every part of my body closed down, and I consciously accepted the blood was just going to my kidneys, my heart, my lungs and my brain. And then at 2 hours 45, even my vision closed down. And that's when I started thinking to myself, is this it? Because when my vision closed down, it didn't go to shades of grey or black as pragmatic copper had expected it to. My vision actually went to pristine white, absolutely pristine white. And that's when I started thinking, is this what they talk about? Is this the light to God? Is this... and I'm not a religious person, but those thoughts certainly went through my mind. But that's when I start fighting my hardest. And you know, for startups, you know, at that darkest hour is when we've got to fight our hardest. I started moving my body the little bit that I could just to give myself confidence that I had something left. I started speaking out loud to myself and saying, Derrick, don't give up. Derrick, keep on fighting. When our minds are open to possibilities, opportunities and choices, our minds can make marvellous things out of something that might seem insignificant to someone else. As my vision was closing down and my vision's gone to white, there were 2 rifle shots from outside the house. I could still hear the shooter inside. 2 rifle shots from outside. That was absolute confirmation that my mates from Star Group are on their way to get me. Dump of adrenaline into the body, endorphins from the brain probably, and my vision snapped back up to absolutely perfect. I was passing in and out of consciousness for 15 minutes before the boys actually got to me, but that's what that opportunity, that possibility, that little glimmer of hope can do for people.
The fact that you had such awareness and were so aware of what was going on in your body just absolutely blows my mind. I mean, is that part of the training that you had, or was that just something that you had just consciously done? I've got to just stay aware. I've got to see what's going to happen next.
I call it kind of collateral awareness. In Star Group, we are trained to rescue first aid levels. So we can go down to someone that's trapped on a cliff and we can treat them on the side of the cliff and stabilise them. We don't insert cannulas or intubate them or anything else like that, but we can stabilise them. I was also a diver, so underwater recovery, and we're diving down to the deepest depths you can on free dives on oxygen. We don't go into mixed gases, but we learn a lot about the body processes and how to control them, and certainly how to conserve our oxygen when we're at great depths and we're under great stress. So what I did in my preparation, once I'd had this conversation with my wife about, hey, listen, I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed, I then said to myself, if I get shot and injured, what would I like to do as an absolute perfect response? And then I brought all those resources together and said, actually, from what I know about that, I'll be able to do this. From what I know about that, I'll be able to do this. From what I know about how I performed back there, I actually want to do it better than what I did back there. So what would better look like? Okay, let's put that together. And I then had this contingency plan for both absolute perfection, what it would look like for absolute perfect outcome. But then I also accept that it may not be perfect. It may be down the other end of this continuum. And how do I influence that to get it closer to that perfect end? I never expected to get perfection, but, you know, we've got to know what perfect is so that we've got something to aim for.
I love that because, you know, in my own experience, the last thing I want to think about is the negatives. You know, you're excited about an idea and how it's going to change the world, that you believe that it will, and everything's about that forward thinking, you know, very positive sort of stuff. But this notion of the confronting conversation, I think, is something that for me is I've never thought of that before. And whenever the bad stuff happens, it's sort of like I just deal with it and know that my bigger picture is always there and I'm striving for that end. But rather than actually thinking about what may happen, and I think that's just a big part for me right now. You know, like that's and I'm sure that there are so many startups out there that are in this same place right now and just thinking about the worst thing that could happen. You know, what you've just shared, just for me personally, has just been revolutionising. It's just amazing. So,
because it seems that much of the support, Derrick, really is there for people kind of along the way rather than the preparation. You know, okay, I've got the idea, and okay, now before you do everything else, are you prepared for what you're about to step into?
Yep, absolutely. And you said you don't like to think of the negatives, and lots of people say don't hang around with negative people, right? You don't want to talk to negative people. You only want to talk to the positive people, the people that are going to encourage you. I actually have a kind of controversial philosophy for that. I actually kind of like to engage with the negative people. Those people are going to say, you're going to have this problem. You know it won't work because of this. I have this saying that I put out to people, tell me why I can't succeed. Tell me what my problem's going to be. Because if you can see a problem, I can either say, yeah, I've thought of that and I have a way of managing it, or actually I haven't thought of that, and if that does happen, that's going to destroy me. Or you say, no, actually, you're not looking at it quite the right way. You have a different concept of what I do. And those are the people that, if they can't quite get the same grasp as you do, you've got to allow them to have their opinion, but don't let it affect you. But I do like to engage with those people who can see the problems, because sometimes I can't see all the problems.
But that also gives you another thing to think about how to get around.
Absolutely,
as well.
Yeah.
So it builds that.
Yeah, absolutely. If they've come up with this thing that I haven't seen, it's like, great, excellent. I didn't see that one coming. Do I have the resources to be able to manage that as well? So it's vital to engage with those negative people as well. You don't want to engage with them for too long. And you've got to be able to compartmentalise people in your life, because there are some negative family that are always going to be there and you can't get rid of them. But you've got to be able to compartmentalise their thinking and go, okay, look, I know I'm going to have to listen to this, but I don't have to let it affect me, right? And then just move on and engage with the people who will support you and have the same philosophies and attitudes as you.
I think, sometimes if you're sort of working from your own context and, what you see as a wonderful idea, and perhaps, the people that love you most are just, are going to default to being supportive of you, that really what might be pie in the sky you don't see. And really it could be the difference between you embarking on something that's destined to fail versus actually seeing, oh, hang on, that is going to fail, and what do I need to do? Or maybe I need to come up with another idea or just adjust my plan. But it's actually... it's a really smart way of dealing with things.
The concept really crystallised for me when I've got an idea for a startup myself, and it's a TV series which is going to be a combination between Top Gear, Getaway, Man vs. Wild, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and it's all around, why do I want to do this? Because I want that lifestyle. I'd love to go out and do those things. But anyway, I've got this idea for this TV series, and I was putting it out. Some people in the industry, and they think it's got really good legs, based on the backstory to it and the name of the show. But anyway, I put it to my father, and I was talking to my father about it. And my father's going, Derrick, you don't want to do this. No. Just stick with your speaking, stick with your policing. Derrick, you don't want to do this. And we had this discussion over a couple of years, and I just could not convince my father that this would work. And it really, really was getting to me. My father, the one person I'd expect to support me through anything. And my philosophy now comes down to, sometimes it's not about what people say, it's the reason that they are saying it. And this crystallised for me when I said, Dad, why are you saying that? And he said, well, Derrick, I've tried a lot of things in my life, and I just couldn't see myself being able to do that, and I don't know whether you could as well. And I said, but Dad, I've got support from this guy, I've got support from that guy, I've got this in place, and I know these processes. And he's gone, yeah, I suppose you've got it. Yeah. Well, okay, go for it, Derrick. And it really was not what he was saying, it was what was the thinking behind it. And then we could talk about that thinking behind it.
Because so many ideas would be crushed also that had potential just purely because someone, took something to heart or had an emotional reaction as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes down a lot to your own self-esteem and your own ability to believe in your success. For those people with a fragile self-esteem, the smallest little negative comment is going to destroy them. Right, that's it. I'm not going to embarrass myself. I won't have you laughing at me. Yeah. But for those people who have a real passion, a real drive for it, they actually don't care what other people think. Their passion will pull them through and carry them through. But you've still got to be open to hearing those things that people say, this is going to cause you to fail. Oh, actually, that little bit resonates for me. I can't shy away from it. I need to deal with it, because if it does happen, it might just destroy me, and that's the confronting conversation.
Do you find that there are certain types of people that adopt this kind of philosophy quicker than others? I mean, I look at the absolutely gifted people that, write lines of code and make tech work. And those guys, for me, they always look at the problems as opposed to the vision.
Yep.
And their life is all about solving a series of problems, and where they get the biggest satisfaction is the fact that they can solve the problems, as opposed to someone like me, who I look at the big picture, I look at the possibilities and the future of something and the markets that it could go into and all those sorts of things. So for me, looking at this kind of philosophy is going to have a huge impact on the way I conduct whatever I do. But for somebody that's an analytical mind, have you sort of encountered anybody in that mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. There are people that take to this. I'm very fortunate that my son is a code writer. He loves being on the computer. He's writing code for games that are absolutely massive, and he has people streaming online to watch him write code. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. But he is the most positive person, and I bounce a lot of my ideas past him, and he gives me lots of really good ideas. So even those code writers can see, possibilities and opportunities, but there are certainly some people around the place that just don't get it at all. They don't like resilience. They just like to have everything planned in place. We are not going to do anything at all until we are absolutely 100% certain that it will work and there will be no problems. In fact, I went to New Zealand to speak to OMV Oil, and I was speaking to one of the executives up there, and he was talking to me about the safety procedures on the oil rig. And he said, if people are performing absolutely perfectly, there will be no safety breaches, there'll be no injuries, there'll be no damage caused to my rig at all. And I said to him, well, that's great, but, you've got weather factors, you've got people who get tired and all that sort of... No. People are not allowed to get tired. If they get tired, they are going to write themselves off and go off shift. And I said, yeah, but people make mistakes. No. People do not make mistakes. They're not allowed to make mistakes. There was no space in his brain for anything other than perfection. And it's those sorts of people that really have a challenge, looking at what are the possible problems that are going to happen in the future, and if they do happen, how will we respond to it now? No, I'm going to eliminate them. They're not going to happen. So there are certainly those people around, and sometimes you just can't change them. The old story, we can't please all of the people all of the time. And for me, it's just about engaging with those people that do connect with me and leaving a seed of possibility sown for those people who are not quite there. Because sometimes we can't convince someone straight away. The next person can't convince them. The next person can't convince them. I relate this. So I talk to kids in schools as well. So as a parent, you'll relate that you've been bringing up children. You tell your children, X, Y, Z. No, come on, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. And then they'll go along to school and some big speaker will come in and the speaker will go, X, Y, Z. And the kids will go, I've got that. Dad, why haven't you told me this in my past life? It's just the right person, the right message, the right way at the right time. So I used to try and convince people that this is a good philosophy and they should think about it. And now I just go, well, if you don't get it right now, hopefully you will sometime in the future. So don't give up on them, straight away. We certainly have, good in-depth, I love an in-depth discussion about it. But if they don't get it, I don't lose sleep over it.
It really is putting emphasis on the human skills and how that has, something go from idea to fruition.
Yep.
That's a necessary skill. The idea itself and the technology alone doesn't get the idea complete without all these processes that, the business owner, the startup, the entrepreneur has to go through. Because if they fall at any of the hurdle, doesn't matter how great the technology is, that won't survive without people driving it.
No, absolutely. I honestly believe that attitude is the most important thing. There's a model that I use in my program called the attitude equation. And attitude, our belief in ourselves, our personal drive, is 90% of our success. 10% of it is the background, the skills, the learning, the intelligence, the courses we've done, the finance. That's all 10%. 90% of success is driven by the people because there's always going to be hurdles. And if you don't have the passion, particularly if you're doing something because you're trying to prove somebody else wrong or to look good in front of someone else, you'll lose that drive very, very quickly and then you'll feel like an idiot. But if you've got that real passion, that real drive to do something to help someone else or to achieve something for yourself, then you'll drive through most of the problems that you'll ever encounter. What
I love about that, it's a real equalizer, isn't it? It really just goes to show that people that have big ideas that are just fearful that they can't see them to fruition because, they don't have the skills or, maybe they don't know how to ask, but they really believe in the idea. That equation has you see that any ordinary person with a good idea with the right attitude could really see it through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there have been books written about those people who go into business with absolutely no education, no finance behind them. They just go in with a really great idea. And then because of their passion, people get on board with them. People love passionate people. In fact, most of the reasons that people employ people these days is not so much for their skills, but for their attitude. right? They may come in with great skills but bad attitude that's going to destroy the business. Come in with few skills but a great attitude, you can train them. You can teach them. So long as they come in with that great attitude, it is going to help you along the way. Having great skills and great attitude is a big bonus, but the attitude is the most important.
Derrick, is there any tips you could leave with us just very simple things and steps that people can take to get into this mindset of resilience and durability?
Yeah, absolutely. And those tips would come straight back to that model of durability. And the first one is be very clear of your vision, be very clear of what you want as an outcome at the end, and don't be derailed from that. Certainly if a better idea comes up, yes, go with it, but don't go chasing the shiny things. Be very clear of what the outcome is that you want and be focused on that. Build up your knowledge, right, around what the challenges are, what the opportunities are. Build up your knowledge of your resources that you have behind you or your experienced intelligent, and be very aware of what the indicators are that are telling you it's going well or it's going badly, and respond to those immediately. Now, that response may just mean, listen, we know that's happened, but we just need to stay on track with what we're doing, right? And that's a conscious choice. But as soon as that new information comes in, you make a new conscious choice. Yes, this is the right thing to stay doing, or because of that, we need to go X, Y, Z, whichever way we want to. In your planning, everybody talks about flexibility in planning, and as I said before, agility is the most important. But there's an old military adage that there is no plan that will survive encounter with the enemy, because those buggers will do something you don't anticipate and you have to change. So even the greatest military planners know that no plan will survive encounter. It's got to change. But if you know what those indicators are, you can change with agility and have lots of options available to you. Make the right choice and follow that choice. But then once you've gone through that whole process, be really committed to what you want to do. Right? And it is that commitment that makes the big difference. The commitment comes down to attitude. How much are you willing to put into it? Because if there's something that you want to achieve and it's not quite going right, doesn't matter what else is happening around you, look at your commitment and your attitude first. Because if you don't have those two things in place, nothing is going to get driven. You might still succeed, but it'll be maybe more luck or good fortune, or somebody else picks up on your idea and helps you along rather than you driving it yourself. And the last one is obviously be prepared to have those open, honest, confronting conversations. Because if you don't have those, nothing else counts. In fact, who is it? Nelson Mandela says you can't prepare for the future while secretly pretending it's not going to happen. Right? So if you don't have those confronting conversations, you're preparing for nothing, really.
That's fantastic, Derrick. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. And to think that from that event came all this wisdom that can now assist startups and entrepreneurs, it really is magnificent. Thanks so much for joining us on the In Show.
My absolute pleasure, guys. Thanks very much for having me.
You can find out more about Derrick, his story and his workshops at derrickmcmanus.com. On the next In Show podcast, some more inspiration just when you thought you couldn't have any more.
Yep, indeed. And one of my favourite subjects in the world is wine. And we're going down to a winery called D'Arenberg Wines, and we're going to hear from Chester Osborne some inspiring things, like an incredible man.
What he has created, like most other people would only dream of and seriously not even think possible.
And it's all driven by passion.
That's on the next In Show podcast.
The In Show Interview. Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.